Let me move us to our next topic, which is that the Syracuse Common Council is considering this week whether to pass a good cause eviction law. That means just what it says, a landlord has to have a really good cause to evict a tenant. And it only applies to landlords who own 10 or more units. Rick, this happens in Albany, Ithaca has it, Poughkeepsie, I think Kingston. Is it a good idea for Utica or here? Or?
First of all, landlords should have to honor their leases. They should have to keep up to code. I believe they shouldn't be able to evict people who have reported them for code violations. But this legislation goes well beyond that. One of the things that I worry about is it includes, a limit on rent increases. And this might seem reasonable given that rents have gone up by 23% in Syracuse over the last 2 years. But the reason they've gone up so much is because the vacancy rate in Syracuse is 1.8%, which tells us what? That we don't have enough apartments. And so what my fear is, this legislation is going to create a further impediment, further disincentive for landlords to put up additional apartments.
I think that is exactly right. To quote the great mayoral candidate, Jimmy McMillan, the rent's too damn high. And that's the problem, is the rents are too high. And why is the rents too high? Because there's not enough housing. If you look at Atlanta, Phoenix, and many of Austin, Memphis, those rents are down 4 and 5% over last year because they're building so much. The problem New York has is just not building enough housing. And that's true in many blue states across the country. So what do we really need to do is build more, and that's what's going to alleviate the problem of the rents too damn high. So,
yeah. I think the problem is much more complicated than we've touched on so far. Syracuse in particular has a housing problem that is both severe and also urgent. Yes, there is the issue of affordability. Syracuse's median rents are higher than the U.S. average, despite the fact that Syracuse has the highest concentration of poor folks. And there's the issue of availability, that there are so few that are available. But in addition to that is the problem of livability, the high number of rental units that have lead and also other kinds of problems that are not addressed by slumlords who live abroad and really don't care about these homes. But to this particular law that deals with evictions, in Syracuse, there are 5 eviction warrants that are issued every single day, and it is impacting primarily working class and low income folks. So something has to be done, but I would agree, I don't know that this is entirely that something, partly because of the law of unintended consequences, where landlords who can evict someone under this law for good cause can now manufacture good cause, because one of the good causes that's listed in the law is being a nuisance. Well, anybody can be a nuisance. And another good cause is that they don't agree to changes in the lease. One of those changes could be adding utilities as part of the rent, which of course would effectively be a rent increase. But I would just end by saying this. Also, there's so many exemptions to improvements, structural improvements, major repairs, and the fact that you cap it at 10% isn't such a big deal. And I think you were touching on this, Rick, because you could increase it every year 10% and eventually edge out your tenants. So this has to be fixed. Something's got to be done. It's a good start. Certainly, we're not there yet.
So yeah, I mean, yes, if you cannot contest rent increases below 10%. And regarding the incentive to build new houses, there were a thing there that all houses built after January 1, 2009, all occupancy certificate of occupancy that was issued after 2009 are exempt from this law. I'll give you some personal, anecdotal things are always bad for social science, we know that, but I heard so much horror stories from graduate students in SU. By the way, SU protects its students, right? SU has a legal department, you can go after your landlord. But I have seen landlord giving causes like, I don't want Indian food to be cooked in my house. That's their one. If you do that, I am going to either kick you out or not give you your deposit back, or some other reasons can be cooked up. And there are people who own 43 homes. I know a person who knows a person who owns 46 houses, all of it in dilapidated conditions, just slumlordism. So I think what this does is at least provide some legal recourse. Now, law costs money. even if you are poor and the landlord threatens you, you actually still have to spend money to go to a lawyer, have a retainer, and so on. So this is just a very bare minimum that one can do that gives some recourse to people who are struggling to pay rent to actually, have something against their
You mentioned
landlord.
anecdotal evidence. Well, if you look at the research, cities that have rent control have much worse conditions because the landlords have no incentive to keep up to code. If you have a 1.8% vacancy rate, whatever, I need an apartment, I'll take whatever I can get. As Ty said, many cities in the Southwest are growing and they don't have these problems. So, this is another example of trying to interfere with the market of supply and demand, and ultimately that causes so many unintended consequences. And again, the literature suggests that in this area, housing stocks suffer badly when the government goes in and sets limits.
I do agree, but I think here they're not saying that it is rent control. It's saying that if you want to increase rent above 10%, then you have to show certain important infrastructural work that you have done with that property.
And you've got one apartment and you're going to go through all this paperwork. You're now going to have to hire a lawyer to be able to, you're going to say, it's not worth it. I'm not going to do it. And so we have even fewer apartments.
Well, we will see what the Syracuse Common Council, and I expect that Utica and Cortland and Oswego will be looking at this as well.